Hi, Anita Recap here. Today we are summarizing a 2020 horror and thriller movie called Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight. The movie begins with a postman riding his bicycle in a majestic forest in Poland. He drops by at a dilapidated house in the middle of nowhere to deliver the mail. The owner of the house is a woman who looks like she's preoccupied with washing blood-soaked clothes. The house is a diseased magnet with roaches everywhere after the owner does not answer the door. The postman looks around the property. He hears noises coming from a boarded, almost window in the basement area, worried someone might be trapped down there. He rips off the wooden board and sticks his head inside to inspect. Why on earth would you open a boarded window of a creepy house, let alone stick your head in? Bad idea. He seems to be alarmed by what he sees and extends his hand to pull someone out. Before he is able to grab his bag, the postman is dragged inside the basement as he screams in horror. The next residents on his route will definitely not be getting their mail after that 30 years pass by. And the movie cuts to present day, with a bus carrying teenagers driving through the same thick forest. The teens have come to the jungle for an offline survival and trekking camp. Their parents have sent them to the camp to cure their addiction to smartphones and the internet. We need more of these retreats these days. After their arrival, the camp leaders seize all their phones and electronic devices. The teens are then divided into different groups, with each group led by a counselor. Each group will head off into the woods the next day. Zozia, Julik, Aniela, Daniel, Bartek are grouped together, and Isa is assigned as their counselor. Bartek is an average teenager excited for the adventure, while Julik is a rounder kid who is occupied by devouring his dinner. Daniel is a jock and is attracted to Aniela, who is a bold blonde. Zozia, on the other hand, is more aloof, and she sits under a tree, seemingly depressed as her teammates mingle, and the scene then cuts to run down the house seen earlier in the movie. The woman, now old and frail, brought with her a dead animal. She struggles to drag the heavy body into the basement, and accidentally falls into the basement along with the dead animal and passes out. A monstrous hand then appears and drops the keys the woman dropped after falling into the basement. The woman gains consciousness, but she is soon butchered by the monster. The next morning, the teens prepare to go deep into the woods. It is revealed that Zozia has tried to commit suicide before coming to the camp, as she hides the cut marks on her wrist with a handkerchief. A priest arrives in a fancy car and prays to the Lord to relieve his believers of their evil addictions. Isa then briefs her group about the 3-day hike, and the team heads into the woods. Julik tries to strike a conversation with Zozia. He tells her that her necklace reminds him of the Terminator T-800 necklace. Zozia, who usually doesn't talk much, tells him that it is her family memento. He then imitates the Terminator's voice. Zozia finally chuckles and playfully responds, "I'll be back." "Way to go, Julik. Watch out, fellas. This guy is Mr. Celio Girl." Meanwhile, Daniel tries to talk to Aniela, but is soon interrupted by Bartek. Bartek tries to pick on Daniel and makes homophobic comments. Boy, is he messing with the wrong guy. Daniel tells him to back off, but Bartek continues. Daniel eventually loses it and pushes Bartek in anger. "I warned him." He rolls over and bruises his leg. Itza nurses his wound, and the two boys then apologize to each other. Julik then excuses himself for a pee break. As he relieves himself, he notices a carcass of a dead, rotting deer. He gets startled. He calls over everyone to check out the dead animal. After investigating the body, Itza concluded that the animal was not hunted by humans, but rather a large carnivore attacked him. But Isa brushes off the danger and assures them that the animals don't attack for no reason. Zozia sees something creepy, a pair of hands hugging a tree in the distance, and then it disappears. Weird. After walking some distance, the group stopped by a lake to spend the night. The team set up their tents and made a campfire. Isa asks Julik why he was sent to the camp. He reveals that he was addicted to computer gaming. Julik was planning to travel to Korea to take part in a championship game, but his parents cut his internet off and sent him here. As she looks at her notes, Isa asks Zozia to share her story. Isa is stumped by Zozia's notes and gives her the option to share her story when she feels like it. All of a sudden, the group sees something quickly run past them that spooks everyone. Isa goes to investigate and finds it's just a fox. After everyone goes to sleep, Daniel sneaks out of his tent to smoke by the lake. Unable to sleep, Aniela soon joins him. One thing leads to another, and Aniela kisses Daniel. You get the gist. Poor Daniel gets nervous and stutters. Aniela figures out that Daniel is a virgin and laughs. Aniela then gets on top of Daniel and tells him that she is going to be his teacher. The two teens then have, in the words of Dr. Sheldon Cooper, coitus under the moonlight. Aniela then goes back to the tent, while Daniel plans to sleep in a sleeping bag by the lake. He then pulls out his phone that he managed to smuggle into the camp. As he browses through his phone, someone appears in the background walking towards him. Just as Daniel notices the monster, it traps Daniel in his sleeping bag and drags him into the woods. A freaked out Daniel moves violently and tries to resist, only infuriating the monster, who then repeatedly smashes him on a tree. Gosh, that looks so painful. Meanwhile, Zosha relives her family's road trip. Zosha and her sister are playing in the backseat, while Zosha's father is driving the car. Zosha's father gets distracted while taking a selfie with their mom. I'm assuming her whole family dies from the incident. And the movie cuts back to Zosha in her sleeping bag. The teen learns that Daniel is missing, and Zosha spots bloodstains on a tree where Daniel was smashed to death, the one who was killed by the giant monster. Isa claims that the blood on the tree is merely tree sap, but the teens don't buy her obvious lie and begin to panic. Isa nevertheless tells everyone to calm down and decides to split up and look for Daniel. Julik tries to warn her that in horror movies, when groups split up, people die. Damn right they do. Isa disregards his warning and asks him, Bartek, and Anila to wait by the lake in case Daniel comes back, while she and Zosha head deep into the woods to look for Daniel. Julik decides to tag along deep in the woods. The trio come across the house of the lady who was killed by the monster. They venture inside to look for Daniel. They come across the lady's sewing machine and a photograph of maybe her twin sons in a room. Julik is scared and pleads with Isa to return back to the lake. They suddenly notice a sound coming from the ground in the room they are in and notice a door opening in the floorboards. Isa opens it and sees a mouse. Isa and Zosha decide to venture into the basement and find the dead body of Daniel. That's when you need to get the heck out of there. They freak out and proceed to flee when suddenly the monster returns. The trio are then forced to hide in the basement. Julik almost throws up from the repugnant smell coming from the room, but Isa stops him. The monster opens the trapdoor and the trio freak out. Isa opens the basement's window and helps Zosha and Julik sneak out. She then proceeds to flee, but she hears the sound of Daniel's phone. Planning to leave only after grabbing Daniel's phone to call for help, Isa decides to fight the monster. Uh-oh, bad idea. However, the only thing that comes out is poor Isa's severed hand. Horrified and frightened, the two teens flee. She should have ran when she had the chance. Meanwhile, Anila and Bartek are talking by the lake, unaware of the looming danger. Bartek reveals that he's gay, but turns out Bartek was picks on Daniel and making homophobic comments because of his own insecurities and internalized homophobia. Anila consoles him and tells her that she can empathize with him. Bartek gets lost in his thoughts. When he finally snaps out of it, he notices the monster, Anna Anila, who has been killed by a metal bar through the back of her neck and mouth. He freaks out and runs away into the woods. After running for a while, Zosha and Julik come across a rundown cabin. They ask for help from an old man who lives in the cabin. In case you didn't notice, the old man is the postman who was dragged into the basement in the beginning of the movie. Zosha tells the man about the huge monster who killed their friend. She pleads with the man to call the police. The old man then asks the duo to calm down and tells them he doesn't have a phone. Meanwhile, after running for some time, Bartek runs into a nearby church. He seeks help from the priest and tells him about his friends being killed. The priest is skeptical of his claims and wonders if Bartek had been taking drugs. Bartek, shaking and sobbing in fear, assures the priest that he is telling the truth and pleads with him to call the police. The priest reveals that his telephone isn't working due to recent violent storms. However, suddenly the telephone starts ringing. Just as he realizes the priest's deceit, Bartek is knocked unconscious by the priest. Bartek later wakes up to find himself tied and gagged. The priest reveals that he remembers Bartek from last year and expresses disgust over Bartek's kind, possibly alluding to the teenage boy's sexuality. Suddenly they hear noise coming from outside and the priest goes to investigate. Out of nowhere, the monster appears and grabs the priest and gouges his eyes out as he screams in pain. The monster then shoves the priest into the wood chipper, brutally killing him. Inside the church, Bartek manages to break free and hides in the confession box. He even holds his breath, but the monster finds him seemingly from his smell. Yup, he's screwed. Cutting back to Zosie and Julik, the old man reveals that he encountered the monster a long time ago, and he lost his legs as a result of it. The man confirms that there are two of them. The man then reveals that once there was a family living in the woods, a mother and her two boys. They led a rather poor life, but loved each other dearly. Everything was fine until one fateful afternoon, when something fell from the sky and crashed near their home. The two boys went to investigate and brought home a piece of the mysterious rock and kept it under their bed. Later at night, the rock started releasing a strange black liquid, which then entered the bodies of the twins, making them act like three monsters. The next morning, their mother woke up to find her two boys missing from their bed. She noticed the trail of blood leading to the basement. To her horror, she found her little boys feeding on their dog. Frightened and horrified, she locked them up in the basement and regularly brought them dead animals to eat, and kept them hidden from the world until she lost her mind. Zosie insists that they must go out and seek help, but the man advises them to stay there if they want to survive. Esty has a gun and food. Zosie insists on seeking help. They decided to go back to the monster's house to retrieve Daniel's phone. She has some serious balls. Zosie and Julek find one of the monsters in the basement, chopping Daniel's hand and drinking blood. Zosie proposes that they hide and wait for the monster to leave, but Julek instead offers to create a distraction to make the monster leave the basement immediately. Zosie refuses to put him in danger, but Julek insists that he must bait the monster if they want to make it out alive. That's quite brave of him. Zosie relents and gives Julek her knife with a good luck kiss. With a newfound motivation, Julek goes to the front of the house and bangs on the door. He challenges the monster to come out. Zosie enters the basement and looks for Daniel's phone. Just as she finds the phone, she notices that the monster has returned and is staring at her. She freaks out and attempts to bolt, but the monster drags her back into the basement. It then grabs her by the neck and lifts her off the ground. She struggles to breathe. Julek rushes into the basement and stabs the monster with the knife, but it barely has any impact on the monster and grabs Julek by the neck. It then stabs Julek as he struggles to breathe and brutally bites Julek's tongue off as he screams in pain. What in the flying frick? Dreaming Zosia is outside in the field where the family crashed their car and sees their car on fire. She then awakens to find herself chained and a badly wounded Julek with a knife in his abdomen next to her. She promises to help him and pulls out Daniel's phone from her pocket. She uses Daniel's severed hand to unlock his phone and proceeds to make the call when the phone battery dies. Her hope shatters, but she quickly collects herself and tends to Julek. Man, she's definitely gonna need some serious therapy if she survives this. She tries to console Julek, but unable to bear the pain, he asks her to put him out of his misery. She initially hesitates but eventually fulfills his request. Even if he didn't survive, Julek fulfilled the promise he made to Zosia to protect her. She then frees herself using the knife to open the locks and proceeds to flee. But seeing the dead body of her friends and counselor, she decides to put an end to the monsters for good. She then grabs the machete from the room. She finds one monster sleeping in the bed holding back her tears in fear. She stabs the monster till it stops moving and flees. Meanwhile, back to the old man. He hears someone knocking on his door. The door begins to open and the man shoots at the door in fear, assuming it to be one of the twins. Afterwards, when he goes to inspect, the man learns that he had killed an innocent Bartek who'd come to the cabin seeking refuge. A distressed Zosia runs into a police car in the woods. She asks the policeman for help, and the two then drive away. On their way, the other monster jumps over their car. The policeman assumes that he ran someone over and ventures out to inspect, leaving Zosia locked in the car. Zosia unsuccessfully tries to warn the officer, and the monster splits the policeman in half with its axe. Fearing for her life, Zosia breaks the backseat window and jumps to the front in the driver's seat as the monster gets on top of her car. She struggles to start the car while the monster axes the car from the top. Scared, Zosia eventually manages to start the car and drive away, causing the monster to collapse on the road. Zosia then stops and reverses the car and runs the monster over. She drives the car over the killer multiple times before finally driving away. This girl is a survivor. Later at night, two drunkards come across this seemingly dead monster laying on the road while police arrive outside the monster's house. The monster's twin then suddenly comes back to life.